Will Hurd is the best candidate, by the way.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so Professor.
Live on YouTube or live on Facebook? Which one?
Live on whatever you want. I think we usually do Facebook and then you later post on YouTube. Welcome, viewers and listeners. Thanks for joining us while we're talking to our producer, Adonis. It's a long story. Don't ask him because he'll interrupt our show telling you about why he wants to be Adonis. Just got back from Spain. Great trip that he did in Spain. I know, it's Greece. You took yourself on mute. Okay, cool. Hey, Professor. Look at Professor's laughing at me. Thank you. Thanks for listening to my humor. So, Professor, for the first time ever, we have done two things on this show. One, we have started 13 minutes late. We have never been this late. So I bet the thousands or hundreds, dozens of people that listen to us live on Facebook are going to be dearly disappointed. Thanks for starting late. You have a good excuse?
I started my update on my computer.
You were the worst professor. If you heard that excuse from a student, you'd fail them. Come on, your dog ate it. I mean,
that's true. Yeah.
Come on. Yeah. You got to zen your students. What's a good excuse, Professor? What's a good excuse the students giving you?
Here's what I will say. Like a good student, I did get on Zoom on my phone on time. So
you were on phone. Yes.
On Zoom. It wasn't ideal. So.
Excellent. I don't know why Adonis is telling us this session ends in 1 minute.
1 hour. I just want you to know there's a timer that maybe you can't see. So I
can't.
Okay, I got on early because I wanted to do some work and stuff like that, and I didn't know it was counting against our time. So in 1 hour,
but I pay big bucks. I can go unlimited. I can go like 35 hours. I pay huge amounts of money to Zoom. All right, we'll talk to Zoom later. Okay, Professor, where are you again? Tony, get off my screen.
I'm here.
Okay, there you are, Professor. Thank you. All right, Professor, we've also done something unusual that I don't remember in our 55 plus shows, that I have given you the whole agenda in advance. You know my questions. So you've had a good 1.5 minutes or 3 minutes to think about how to answer my questions historically. Usually I try to hit you cold to see how fast you think on your feet. This time you should just be brilliant in all your answers, correct? Because like I told you what my questions were like 3 or 4 minutes ago. So here's the intent, though. I'm hoping that in less than 1 hour, thank you, Adonis, in less than 1 hour, anybody that listens to this show today, tomorrow, next week, next year, a decade from now can go, aha, I finally understand what conservatives think. I listen to John Hackney, who says he's a conservative. Professor Tootle has bona fides extraordinaire as a conservative. And our ground wire, former state legislator and county commissioner Bill Jerky, is a conservative true and true. True and true. So we have 3 conservatives on the show, and I'll bet you we're going to argue about all of these topics I provided you. But it will give the setting of, wait, conservatives are different than liberals. Or are they? And what's different now versus 50 years ago or 100 years ago? Remember, you're the historian. Try to give a historical equivalence to these questions. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Title IX. Yeah, that needed to happen because we just weren't treating women fairly enough and all sorts of things. And unless federal legislation happened, still to this day, there'd be all sorts of problems in America that women wouldn't have the opportunities of the opportunity to have that men have had for a long time. And it's a good thing that Title IX passed, I think today or tomorrow in 1972. Correct or incorrect? You're a conservative, is that an improper law? Should that have been done at the state level? Talk to us historically about the importance of Title IX and where we should be arguing. And by the way, if we had time, I'd even squeeze in trans and in sports and how that fits into Title IX. So we could talk a whole show about that question alone. Just give some reactions. And then, Bill, you're welcome to jump in as well. Professor, Title IX.
Well, I guess I'd start by resetting our fundamentals here and reminding us of that our system is designed around the premise that you have both a culture and a system. And
love it.
Both of those things are necessary but not sufficient to living a free life. And one of the things that is difficult is what happens when you have a particular state not protecting the individual rights of its citizens. And in those particular circumstances, we say, well, then if that is the case, if the state is not protecting the individual rights of its own citizens, then the federal government has to intervene in order to make sure.
So let me interrupt. I love your big picture stuff, but you're telling me that some states prior to June 23rd, 1972 were protecting the equal opportunity of all women, or no states were allowing women fair competitiveness in college sports, etc. The purpose for Title IX. Talk to me. I'm trying to talk practical. That legislation, should conservatives have supported that in 1972, and should they support it in 2023?
I think so. I mean,
why?
Again, because you have this case of a demonstrable case of a group of citizens who were not having their rights protected by their state and local governments. And so I get back to this old Lincoln quote: proper role of government is to do for a community of citizens what they cannot do or do so well for themselves in their separate but individual capacities. And all other things, government ought not to interfere. So absolutely, the individuals who live around you should be able to protect your rights, and that should be done as an individual, on your street, in your precinct, in your city, in your county, and in your state. But in the cases where that's not happening, then that's where it has to get bumped up to the next level of government.
So ideally, though, wouldn't it be better to have a variety of the states of the, what is it called? The experiment of, no, I'm forgetting the term, of the laboratory of democracy.
Sure.
All the states doing their own thing, and maybe in some states women are totally equal, and other states they're not, and we can live with that.
Right, but I guess I would remind you that this wasn't something that just happened overnight. This is something that happened after a 200-year conversation. So the system was working. We did get this sort of laboratory of different levels of protection, and we tried a lot of different things, but there were still some areas where rights were not being protected. And so at that point, it does have to go up to the federal level. And you'd say the same thing for Black people, or in that sense. Oh, did we just lose John? I think John just froze up. Can everybody else still hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yeah, okay. So until John comes back, I'll follow his agenda, because I think the next thing he was going to ask about was some of the issues and the point, and he was going to mention wars and Roe versus Wade. And I think in many cases, it's important to remember that a conservative, an American conservative, is here to protect both the process and the culture. And in that same sense, right? If I said that in order for the system to work, you have to protect both the process and the culture. Oh wait, are we getting John back? John? Oh, yep, we got John back.
So, keep going.
Okay. So if you're a conservative, you're here to protect both the process and the system, and you're here to protect the culture. You're protecting the American system that does a pretty good job of protecting rights, and then you are protecting the culture that breathes life into the system. And so in each one of these cases, I tend to find that protecting the system and protecting the culture are usually not mutually exclusive. But in the cases where they are mutually exclusive, I protect the system over the culture. So, I would say in 99.99999% of the cases, I would say you can protect the culture, meaning protect the way that, your own freedoms and try to live your life the way that you think is exemplary or useful, or however you order your own values, and you express them to the people around you. That is, in a sense, protecting the culture. And that usually does not conflict with protecting the system. But in most cases, I would say if those do conflict, I would probably side with protecting the system, because that's what preserves liberty to all. And then in the rare cases,
and Professor, Professor, I remember you were going to say in rare cases, but I'm not sure I'm following you. The system is what's in the Constitution. Checks and balances, roles and responsibilities, levels of government, a slowing down of the process to make sure that we're just not a pure democracy and we get what the mob wants today. It's a thoughtful way to engage in disagreement, a non-violent way to settle disputes. Is that what you're talking about, the system?
Yeah, and then I would say, but there are those rare cases where, even rarer still, I would say, where there might come a time where you as an individual have a moral responsibility to break the law. And in those cases, you reserve what's called civil disobedience, where you say, okay, well, now I'm going to break the law and accept the punishment for breaking the law in order to demonstrate the wrongness of the law. But,
and by the way, that's key though, right? Is you have to be willing to accept the penalty, even though it's unjust.
Yeah, because
so the Rosa Parks, she deserved to be arrested.
Well, because what you're trying to do is again, in keeping with the Lincoln philosophy, the idea is that there is no way to save the Constitution by destroying it. That's a legal and logical absurdity. You don't get to save the Constitution by destroying it. So in the cases where the system has put you in a position where you have to do something that you feel is morally wrong, you demonstrate the wrongness of the system.
Okay, I'm going to send you a zinger now. I gave you a Rosa Parks real quick, fine. But now I'm going to send you a zinger. Ready for this one?
Yeah, hit me.
Former president, forgive me, Trump, constitutionally is ineligible to run for president again under the 14th Amendment. I think that actually is likely true. Now, who gets to decide that? Is it the federal government? Is it Congress? Is it impeachment? Is it the states? Is it John Brackney? Who stands up and says that? It's right in the 14th Amendment. Well, who determines the law and the facts and determines that? I'm following your logic, Professor. I'm listening to Lincoln. We saw what happened on January 6th. We see a bunch of Republican candidates with a litmus test that you must support whoever wins the Republican primary, and almost everybody goes, yeah, I'm going to support everybody. There's 2 or 3 exceptions, Christie and the guy from Texas that just signed up.
Will Hurd.
So there's some nuances. Bill Barr's had his opinion. Give us Professor Tootle's opinion on what's a conservative to think on something that they can clearly read in the Constitution, the 14th Amendment.
The answer is yes. So
what was my question? Damn it!
Well, you said whose responsibility, and then is it following the Constitution? And then you listed a bunch of people, and the answer is all of them. Everybody has an individual responsibility to follow the Constitution. But in terms of, so that means that just because you're in Congress, you shouldn't do things that are unconstitutional just because just on the chance that maybe it'll slip by the Supreme Court. No, but in the cases of who is the final decision of what is constitutional, and I guess, but I'll give an exception to that. The final decision on what is constitutional for now is the Supreme Court, but even the Supreme Court overturns itself. And so if you go back and
Congress can overturn the Supreme Court by writing a new law, or the citizens, they can nuance their law to make it constitutional, or the citizens can write a new constitutional amendment through the states. There's lots of ways to keep determining.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the position that Republicans found themselves in after the Dred Scott decision, essentially the political beliefs of most Americans were declared unconstitutional under the Dred Scott decision. And so,
explain that in layman's terms, though. People haven't read the Dred Scott decision. What was the decision, and explain that real quick.
the Dred Scott decision said that no Black person, slave or free, was or had ever been a citizen of the United States. And Congress could not, therefore, legislate slavery in the territories. Now, this is a position that would have, shocked the founders, because the Northwest Ordinance was passed by the same people who passed the Articles of Confederation, and the same people who voted for the ratification of the Constitution also voted for the passage of the Northwest Ordinance. So clearly they all thought that that Congress had the power to legislate slavery in the territories.
But let me interrupt, Professor. You said culturally, citizens were shocked by that decision. It shocked their conscience at the time, not just today. I mean, clearly we all think that's absurd today. But at the time, the majority of citizens were shocked at this decision of the Supreme Court.
Yes, in small towns across America, in pews and sermons and newspapers, it was shocking. So much so that they organized a new political party almost spontaneously that nominated somebody for president less than a year and a half later. I mean, it's
Abraham Lincoln. So, Professor,
it wasn't Lincoln in '56, but
which one was it?
Fremont was,
right. So, Professor, critical race theory. Sorry to send you another zinger. I told you the agenda in advance. No, I did not tell you this.
Yeah.
Critical race theory. You're telling me, do most liberals, by your understand this discussion we're having right now, or do they just draw a broad brush that America's been bad in the past regarding slavery, and it's much more complex and nuanced than saying slavery for a couple hundred years, then Jim Crow for another 100 years? Are you understanding my question? It seems to me like you're fair enough. But it seems like we want to just draw a broad brush against the other side, saying that you guys are racist, or you guys are intolerant, or you guys are violent. And is that always been true? You're adding some complexity. Well, for you, it's not complex. You're just saying it's historically accurate. But there is, I'm not stating it correctly enough. Can you react to this at all, or do I need to rephrase it altogether?
Well, I guess when people ask me questions about critical race theory, I guess I'll remind you that what we're really talking about is appropriateness of school curriculum for people at various ages. Because on one hand, I think almost all critical theory is something that should really be reserved for graduate school, or law school. That's where I started to learn some of this. Yeah. I mean, if you think about kind of the building blocks of what you're supposed to be learning, I think that most people, we somehow think that we can skip to thinking outside the box before we learn the box. It's like we want to talk about critical race theory, and people don't know that we have 3 branches of government. Right. You've got to learn the basics first, because almost all, and I'll just lump critical race theory in with all critical theory, Marxist theory, feminist theory, whatever your particular theory is, almost all of those come down to this idea that you're going to take, imagine like a lens filter that you are using for your phone to take a picture. And as you are using your Instagram filters, you swipe through one and it kind of makes things look a little hazy. You swipe through another, it's black and white. You swipe through. In other words, each of these critical theories I'm now going to look at American, literature through the theory of feminism and see what I see by using this different lens. I'm now going to look at American environmental history through the lens of, Marxism or whatever, That's all fine. It's good. I almost think it's a waste of time, even at the master's level or in law school. I think it's one of those things that should be really reserved for, academic journals that nobody reads. The idea that somebody should be learning that as an elementary school student is just completely absurd. I even wonder you know, because you can't learn everything at every age. You have to,
Sure.
you know, you have to sort of, as I said, you have to learn the box before you learn to think outside the box. And
So Professor,
go ahead.
Professor, I love your box and outside the box. You've said that several other conversations. Thank you. Your lens explanation today was really good. Did you create that?
I just thought of it right now. It's because you know, I was using that phone thing earlier and it blurred out my background. So I was kind of thinking about the different, you know, filters you could put.
Did you learn that from some other smart group like the Dispatcher or some other journal or something? Or did you create that? Is that yours?
I don't know. You know, it's a I would
Yeah,
assume it's
yeah. So Professor, remember that though.
Somebody else has to have thought of
So
it.
should tax dollars be spent at universities forcing students to take classes in which, let's say it's feminist classes, that they only look through those classes and what is being taught through those rose-colored glasses that only show positives of feminism and the negatives of toxic masculinity or whatever.
And I told you, Professor Jerky, Professor Tootle, that Commissioner Jerky would be our ground wire. This is an excellent nuance.
But I think the answer is no. I mean, you know, what is happening right now in California is we're all being required to demonstrate a particular ideological perspective in every class. And I say this, like, this includes air conditioning repair. You know, I think that most people, if you are taking a class to learn how to repair an air conditioner, what they want as the educational outcome at the end of that class is, you know how to fix an air conditioner. I mean, it's one of those very basic things that every taxpayer has the right to assume that normal things are happening in your school district. You know, in other words, I think one of the things that happened during COVID is that parents for the first time were confronted with the curriculum that their students were actually encountering, and people were shocked by it because they realized, like, oh, my kid is not learning any of the stuff that I thought they were learning, and instead they're, you know, they're learning about stuff that is maybe. So,
Professor, let me interrupt. Professor, let me interrupt. You would agree then with the Republicans running for president and legislators all around the U.S. and in the media is currently presented that stop critical race theory teaching in school, as that broad premise. And maybe there's some nuances, but the bottom line is Republican candidates say critical race theory is junk and stop it. You would generally concur with that.
Well, no.
I heard you, and the answer is yes.
It's age inappropriate. You know, it's inappropriate for this group of people.
Okay, yeah, that you did say that, but then you also went in and said, well, it's mostly junk all over the place, even in grad school and law school.
There's another caveat, though.
Okay.
Viewpoint discrimination is a bad idea.
Okay. Love this.
In all cases. So just as, you know, the fact that Gavin Newsom is doing this in California and Ron DeSantis is doing the opposite in Florida, I would say they're both wrong. And I know I have this radical notion. Let me run a little piece of radicalism.
Please.
I have this fantasy, by the way, where I meet someone and I ask them, do you think that what you're saying is true? You know, do you think that the stuff that you're saying is true? And then I want them to say to me, yes, I think that what you're saying is true. And then one reply can be, well, then why not let the truth be the thing that be the defense? Why does it have to be ideological discrimination? Why can't we just say that as long as what you're doing is in the pursuit of the truth, then it's fine? but if you are discriminating on the basis of ideology, then it's not fine.
That's a real, Jake, I hope you're taking notes, man. We've got a couple different things the professor said really good today. Bill, you will at least agree with me that critical race theory is junk, right? Just abolish it all at all levels. This is stupid. It's a liberal ideology. Just stop it. Damn it. Now. Stop it. Will you agree, Commissioner Jerky? That's your statement.
I will agree that teaching that a gender or teaching that a race, for example, is inherently going to be fascist, discriminatory, evil. I believe that is the CRT that I don't like. Okay, that I
think I'm
would
following
agree with
you.
what your statement was.
Yeah, I think I followed your. Yeah.
Teaching that white people are all going to be bad because of slavery in the 1800s. Okay?
Right.
All of today's white people are ugly, bad, wrong people, and they all owe us reparations.
Yeah, and so actually,
That
gentlemen,
to me is wrong.
yeah, gentlemen, I think we've reached the nexus on one issue. I don't think we did it on Title IX, but I do think we've reached it on one issue that can give people a look on how conservatives view this issue. Let me give you a third option. Professor, tell me if I'm right or wrong. I took a feminist in the law course at the University of Denver as a law student that I adored. I thought it was completely wonderful. It was 6 very off the charts liberal women and a crazy, in a nice way, crazy, off the charts liberal professor. And I came in and said, I'm an angry white male conservative Republican and I'm here to watch you. And they actually kind of laughed nervously. But over the time, I tried to do my best job debating them. And I actually think I understand women a little bit better just because of that course, just to hear, for a whole semester, 6 women arguing about all these crazy feminist stuff. And I liked them. I don't agree with them. Didn't agree with them then. I don't think I agree with them now. I am sure I didn't convince them at all of my views. But I do think I have a better appreciation for their thoughts. I enjoyed that as a law student. You think I'm wrong? Was that a waste? It wasn't. It's a private university. But was that appropriate? Or no, John, you should have studied contracts law. You'd make a lot more money. So talk to me about critical race theory at that high level. I liked it.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think that part of a college education should be, learning to look at things with varying perspectives. But the thing is, it can't replace learning the fundamentals. So it's something.
Yeah, I should have studied torts and contracts and constitutional law.
I mean, we sometimes act as if the time and intellectual bandwidth of students is unlimited, and that somehow teachers are also these unlimited vessels that you can just pour whatever you want in, and that's simply not true. You have to prioritize your day, and I think it is extremely valuable to preserve the freedom to look at things from a different perspective. Like that's valuable, but at the same time, it also can't just be that. Because I mean, here's the thing. Like again, using our lens metaphor, like if we're supposed to be learning how to make a cake, then we can't just keep looking at cakes through different lenses. At some point, we actually have to learn how to make the cake. You can't eliminate the cake making class and only have classes on looking at cakes through lenses, because you can look at the cake as many times as you want through different lenses. You will never actually learn how to make a cake unless you learn how to make a cake.
Same as the air conditioning analogy.
Yeah.
So do you think that's what conservatives are actually arguing, or are you giving a sophisticated nuance? And Bill, I want you to jump in on this as well.
Well,
Professor.
I think what conservatives are concerned about is the results, the effects, and often we get caught up in this because we just want this thing to stop. There's nothing in particular about the conservative brain that makes it any better from any other, reactionary brain that says this bad thing is happening. Now I want this bad thing to stop. So,
Okay.
but I would say the conservative part of us should hold up and make sure and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Right.
So we say, all right, yeah, I want this bad thing to stop, but I do also want to preserve, the idea that schools are supposed to teach the truth and not engage in viewpoint discrimination.
Yeah,
So,
this is an excellent conversation. Bill, do you have a reaction to that? Do you agree with the professor?
Well, I'm a little off key on this probably, but I did want to mention to you guys that I noticed the professor's Northern Colorado shirt there. And that's where I went to college, Northern Colorado. And you know,
That's
when
where
I
you were a
studied,
state representative and a county commissioner.
and I studied in Northern Colorado, I studied that college, that university, a whole lot for several years there. And I studied the women's movement. And I got to report back to all of you guys that they moved really well back in the 70s.
Oh, Bill, that was not a double entendre, right? That was a sophisticated.
That was
Okay.
very sophisticated. Yes, yes.
Okay. Yeah, Bill, thank you for your service to the public. I still have to ponder. I'll watch this on the tape to see if it was appropriate or not. So, Professor,
yes.
you got to bake the cake. I get it. So, submarines, and I want to be respectful on this part because they apparently just died yesterday or maybe 3 days ago. But is it worth celebrating that this company thought of this cool thing to go see the Titanic? Is it dreadful that they didn't listen to their former military security experts saying this isn't the right submarine for this depth, this is insanity? Well, you're fired? Is it no, this is stupid. We should not allow humans to go do really stupid things by going way down low in the ocean or way up high into space, or way fast in cars or motorcycles. And this is something everybody has kind of thought through. I mean, it has affected me. 5 people just died, but they were doing something cool, or no, they're a bunch of spoiled billionaires and they took a weird risk. Well, wait, why'd we waste all these resources and attempting to save them? Well, because it's kind of the right thing to do. Talk to me about submarines. What is the conservatives' view on this? I heard the radio today. They said there needs to be additional regulation to prohibit this. I mean, this wasn't safe. So where does the conservative lay in this kind of exploration idea?
Well, I guess the deep conservative in me just responds directly by saying, are you kidding? What makes you think that you can regulate everything in the world, and especially international billionaires? At what point would a county commissioner in Colorado be able to regulate the behavior of a Pakistani billionaire? Like, there is no law. Like, we don't need to run to Congress every time anything happens. And the other thing that, and I did notice this in kind of beginning in the, I should say, maybe the example of how President Reagan handled the Challenger explosion. It gave a model to then how President Clinton handled the bombing in Oklahoma. And it led to this thing where we think of the president as somehow being our national daddy that is there to process our emotions on every issue. And while I think that it is important that the president be both head of state and the head of our government, and while it is,
Lost you there. I guess I'd be curious about if you guys can hear me. As to
I can hear you, Bill. I can't hear Professor either, but I can hear you.
Yeah, what did John and perhaps Bart think about liability? This, to me, it's a tort. It's a civil wrong, and the company, the operators of the company, should be wide open for big lawsuits in this case.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick.
This wasn't crime. It's lawsuit.
Yeah, let me jump in real quick, and then Bart can be more accurate since he's our resident lawyer. Bill, I kind of think it depends on the contract. If it's a private, rich people doing some extraordinary thing, climbing Everest or being rocketed into space or going to a submarine, I don't care a whit about it. I mean, not a whit about it. It's a private, high-risk thing, and they all have lawyers, and they know the risk. So I think this is a no-brainer. Let them do what the heck they want to do, and the government doesn't need to be involved except enforcing the contract. Now, the nuance is, and then Bart can be more sophisticated than I am, at a certain point, if it becomes colloquial, if it becomes a public use, a bus that we can all just pay a fare for and jump on, but the bus drivers are drunk or they never test the brakes. Or, I mean, at a certain point, yes, government has a role in regulating it because it's open and available to everybody that doesn't have lawyers and insurance and understand the complexities of science and law. And then I think we should protect the people that don't know better. You think you're going to get on a bus, it should be fairly safe. You think you're going to get in a submersible for $250,000 to go see the Titanic? I'm sorry. Good luck. Or, I mean, I hope I'll look forward to seeing your pictures on Facebook. But I don't mean to be flippant about who died. I think it's yikes. They have family and friends. It's horrible for them. But what a cool opportunity for them to try. I don't want to stop them trying to go see something neat. Anyway, that's my answer. Bart, what do you say?
Well, I agree with both of you, actually. You know, in terms of the liability here, I will get like super wonky legal for a minute. My guess is the company, whatever it was called, that owned the submersible probably had insurance to cover this kind of stuff because they always do. And is there liability? Sure, except that I bet the company probably had everybody sign waivers.
Oh, huge waivers. Yeah.
You know, I mean, they were going down 12,000 feet underwater. That's like really inherently dangerous. It's just one of the most dangerous things you could possibly ever do. So, you know, okay, that's the end of the legal wonkery. You know, aside from that, I'm with both of you guys on this. I don't think we should regulate this kind of thing. You know, I think it was a tragedy that this occurred. I think it's amazingly ironic that the wife of one of the owners of the company who died, unfortunately, on the submersible, was actually the great granddaughter of somebody who, you know, of grandparents who died on the Titanic. I mean, that's
wow.
It's kind of
Didn't
amazing.
hear that one yet.
Yeah, it's really amazing. But you know, I don't know. I don't think you can regulate stuff like this, really. Because
well, sure you can regulate it, but I just don't know if it makes sense to regulate it because it just makes the adventure much more expensive. And then what's the harm and unintended consequences of that? I'm hoping the professor jumps in.
Of course, years ago, we limited liability in Colorado big time for horseback riding,
at least
trail rides, and skiing, snow skiing. And limited liability big time.
Because there is historic. Yeah.
Bart, did you write any of that stuff?
No doubt.
Actually, the horse one, yeah.
Did you? Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so you're right.
All right, can you all hear me?
We have limited liability for that kind of stuff. Sorry, John.
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
I was able to hear most of yours. I think I was cut off from you. I was hoping the professor was going to jump on. Good analogies, Bart, and thanks for recognizing it, Commissioner Jerky.
Toodles,
I was hoping the professor
Toodles' internet went down, he said. So.
Yeah. Well, have him sign in on the phone again. I was hoping the professor was going to jump in because there was a submarine, I think, in like the Civil War that was used and that they create. I mean, submarines have been around a long time. And people just experiment with all sorts of stuff. It would not shock me. I didn't do it, but it would not shock me if young men and women in their neighborhood lake experiment with some version of, a upside down bathtub underwater. I mean, you know, I don't mean to be flippant about it, but people like to try things. And so how can you prohibit every dangerous thing? And the answer is, I'm not sure we should even try. At least when it's not just open to the general public. I think general accommodations of a restaurant should be clean and hotels should have some level of expectation besides the contract. I think there should be some level of government standard, so to speak. But it doesn't have to be all the time, everywhere. Jake, do you have your finger up, or did you go offline?
No, I was trying to like kind of raise my hand, but I didn't want to raise my hand.
Yeah.
I like how you commented on how like regulation for different industries, whether it be like automobiles, airplanes, submersibles. I like it how you're saying we should wait until it becomes like a public commodity. Like, oh, we built the city of Atlantis, so I'm going to hop on the submarine and go to work. Because if you put in regulation, Toodles talked about this too. If you put in regulations when an industry is just emerging, that will stifle competition and innovation. Because yes, this Titanic submersible may have been unsafe. However, people now know there is a market where rich people will gladly pay $250,000 to hop on it to go down to the bottom of the ocean. So think about it. If you make it safer and improve it, you can open it to the general public. And then, you know, Bart, Bill, John, Toodle, whoever, we can one day maybe pay like $100 to hop on it. But if you if you try to put in a regulation right now, then this industry will not develop and it will probably die.
Yeah, and to your point, Jake, the opposite will also happen. You know, there's going to be a business that goes with the right engineers and the right safety folks to go, yeah, they couldn't make it, but for $1 million a piece, we could take 5 people down. But we can't make this work on $250,000. We can make it work for $1 million. And then to your point, then somebody else is going to go, yeah, but you guys are all making too much profit. I'm going to do it. And then it becomes a public commodity. Maybe. I'm not sure space is going to be a commodity in our lifetimes, despite what Elon says.
Well, and it's just kind of interesting if you look at like commercial goods and services in general. My father-in-law turned 70 this year. And so my sister-in-law put together a really cool poster that was like what life was like in 1953 when Dad was born. The first color television started coming out in 1953. It was like $1,100.
Yeah.
And it said that the average income in 1953 was like $4,000. So it used to be people were spending 25% of their annual income to get a color television. But now over time, there's been competition and innovation. And now you can buy really good televisions for a couple $100, which isn't even close to being like a fraction of most people's annual income. But again, if the government steps in and starts regulating stuff, it will stifle innovation and competition, and then it will not become readily accessible for the general public.
Yeah, you're such a good
we have really big screens and remotes.
Well, and Jake, you're such an awesome example of facts. I'm just wondering why my family didn't afford a color television until the mid-'70s, and why didn't they have a microwave until I went to college in the mid-'80s. But anyway, and they could afford it, I think, barely. All right, Professor, you're back in?
Yeah.
So you missed some great conversation. You'll just have to credit your former student, Jake, for leading a brilliant little conversation. Commissioner Jerky jumped in, and then Bart jumped in. You'll have to read the tape, or listen to the tape, because it was cool. Okay. But we've got to get to Roe v. Wade. I think everyone misunderstands conservatives on Roe v. Wade. In the context, we've talked Title IX, we've talked submarines, we've talked the GOP candidates, a little bit of insurrection. We didn't get to Ukraine, and we haven't gotten to AI. But I will say that I don't think liberals have any idea. I think I understand liberals better than they understand conservatives on Roe v. Wade. And this is where you and I are going to disagree on this, so get ready. I am pleased with the Dodd decision that overturned Roe v. Wade after 50-ish years of allowing women to have an abortion nationwide. I think that's the right decision. I think Roe v. Wade was wrongfully decided. A fundamental right of privacy was written into the Constitution by the U.S. Supreme Court, and Dodd overturned that. And I think that's the right decision. You and I disagree. Go.
Here's where I disagree. I think that it's perfectly appropriate as part of liberalism that liberals are supposed to care about results. You know, that's part of their core ideology is that they
I love that, by the way. That's really important, though, for us to recognize they want to care about results. Because my wife, when she just listened to my statement, if she ever listens to that, will be really mad at me. Say that again.
So it's perfectly appropriate for liberals to care about results, because they say, I don't care what I need to do. You change the system in order to get the result that I want right now. It is up to conservatives to care about process and results, with the belief that believing in the process will, over the long term, produce the best result.
Love this.
But that means that if you're a conservative, you sometimes do things that are going to, you're going to, quote unquote, this is why so many people think that they think that conservative justices flip or are somehow acting liberal because they'll note that the result of a case is in keeping with what a liberal might want.
I'm so glad you logged back in. This is really important for people to understand. Keep going.
Yeah. So you say, well, the result in case X, Y, or Z is not what we wanted it to be, but and you say, oh, those conservative justices are now just a bunch of liberals. But what they might have been doing is protecting a process, which is ultimately what conservatives are supposed to care about over the long term. Whereas, again, it's, conservatives and liberals are not the opposite of one another. They have different ideologies. That's what I think I was trying to get at with that comparison of DeSantis and Gavin Newsom, right? We don't want, like, a Gavin Newsom but with blow hair that's not slicked back, like or why I say when Obama did it, it was wrong, and then when Trump did the same thing, it was still wrong. Or when people are saying, like, about Trump's documents.
So Obama was DACA and Trump was the wall, or use a different analogy.
Biden, it's student loans, but three wrongs don't make a right. It was wrong when Obama did it. It was wrong when Trump did it. It's wrong when Biden does it. And people who say, well, what about Hillary's email? I say, yeah, she should have been prosecuted too. The answer is not, we don't prosecute Donald Trump because we didn't prosecute Hillary Clinton. Like, no, we should have prosecuted Hillary Clinton and we should prosecute Donald Trump. Like, we don't get to just do the wrong thing because they did it too.
Okay, so excellent storytelling or examples on Roe and Dodd. You think I'm a classic conservative then? I just told you what I thought. I thought Roe was wrongfully decided. The Supreme Court made up a fundamental right, the right of privacy, in the Constitution that's clearly not there, wrongly decided, and rightfully overturned it in Dodd. That's my position. What's yours?
I disagree with that position.
Love it. Tell me, what's your position? I told you mine.
Yeah, Roe was wrongfully decided, but not because there is no inherent right to privacy in the Constitution.
Love this.
I think that the fundamental way of understanding our federal government is federal government is primarily a vehicle to protect our negative liberties. That means that the fundamental thing that the federal government is supposed to protect is what you might call privacy, but what James Madison called property. If you look at how Madison described property, Madison said, oh yeah, I mean property, but I mean all of this is property. And that the primary role of government is the protection of all of these things that go along with being left alone. So there is, and one of those things, I mean, you wouldn't call it an inherent right to privacy, but you would say, of course, your right to privacy is part of being left alone. So anyone who says that the right to be left alone is not part of our constitutional order, I think is incorrect, and incorrect according to how Madison described it. But that doesn't mean that.
So let me interrupt you again. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just say, like, the decision wasn't, what I would have said. And I think we're going to
Fair
probably end up somewhere pretty close to where Roe was, but we're going to end up there maybe the right way, because I think the Dobbs decision is better than what it replaced, because of where it located the the sort of fundamental right to privacy was kind of just made up. So they can't,
Yeah.
like a clock is a stop clock is right twice a day. That's kind of how I view the Roe decision. You don't say the clock is working. You just say like, oh, well, they happen to be checking their clock at the right time.
So we just heard from two conservatives, me and Professor Tootle. Bill Jerky, you're our ground wire on this. We've heard two conservative positions.
Yeah.
You are the ground wire. You're going to argue a different position, probably the fundamental right to life position. Maybe not. I don't mean to talk to us. What's your position?
Okay. Yeah, let me ask the professor this. Do you think that the fetus will ever have a right to life as determined by the Supreme Court? As I thought Roe versus Wade is that the woman simply had a constitutional right to get an abortion.
Yeah.
Do you think it will ever go so far as to give the fetus an absolute right to life from the point of, I guess, conception on?
From conception on, probably not.
From what point on then?
But I do think that at some point we're going to end up with some kind of balancing test that because we do have these balancing tests in other areas of the law that are wildly tricky. So you're asking me to predict the future. I don't think it's going to end up in the conception, but eventually what we're going to probably decide is that there is some sort of sliding scale, if you will.
Well, like 90% of the public would agree that morning after pill is okay.
Yeah.
90% of the public would also say third term abortion is not okay.
Right.
So there's
with some exceptions,
right there.
Bill, with some exceptions, 90% of people would say that. But if the life of the mother's at risk, 90% of people would say no. We'll still let the woman live and the fetus die.
Yeah.
If one's going to die, with exceptions. Thank you.
The old
Go ahead,
exceptions.
Professor. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the case is that when people use these labels to describe their positions, it almost always obscures a nuance that people would have if you were to ask them more in-depth questions.
So since we're running out of time, Professor and Bill, thank you. Bill, that was a great question. Thank you. I will do the William F. Buckley in the original firing line, I think is the show. You're wrong. Here the right answer is government shouldn't be involved in this, if at all possible. That's why I want a fundamental right to privacy enshrined in our Constitution from the legislative branch, not the judicial branch. That's what I think a conservative should be arguing for. And I know it gets really sticky. And one of the easiest really sticky things is slavery or racism. No, some states can't have slaves, or some states can't be overtly public accommodation. No, I'm sorry. It's a universal respect under our Declaration of Independence. Thank you, Professor. Enshrined in our Constitution that no, you can't be racist. Sorry. Well, wait, John, but you could have an abortion when we're not sure? And the answer is maybe.
The answer is you can't be a racist. You just can't allow your racism to.
Yes. Yeah, good point. A good nuance. Yeah, you can be whatever weird thought you want to be. Yeah.
I'll try and bring this full circle. And also, I think you're thinking of the McLaughlin Group, not firing lines.
It is the McLaughlin Group. Thank you.
I was a devoted McLaughlin Group watcher.
Love that show.
But let me try and bring it back to the Title IX discussion, which is that in the cases of shouldn't this be something that the government stays out of? The answer is yes. If culture is taking care of it, it's only when you demonstrate that culture is unable to protect the rights of the individual that the government ought to interfere. But it's sort of up to you and I to decide.
When life begins. Sorry to insert myself, Commissioner Jerky. What? It's up to you and I to determine when life begins.
Well, unless you get the answer wrong, and then the government has the right to come in and say, no, you're wrong. You don't get to decide that, right?
And Professor, sorry to do the interlude, but I'm trying to give my liberal friends nuance on conservatives, some understanding how a variety of us can have different views but still be looking at it in a conservative way, rather than a result.
Well, I would say this:
oriented way, which
his audio. Yeah, sorry, we lost John's audio again. But let me answer the question he asked at the beginning, which is, what's the conservative way of looking at this? Which is that go back to Lincoln, what the proper role of government is. If you're by yourself and you're not harming anybody, and we always retain the right of conscience, right? The government doesn't get to control my mind. And there can never be a government right to control someone's individual thoughts or feelings, or and even someone's actions, until they start interfering and interacting with other people. So you say, don't I have the people will sometimes conflate, why don't we need a license to have a gun when we have a license to drive a car? Well, the license to drive the car is the license to operate a car on a public road.
Excellent. If you can hear me.
I heard the beginning of it. But the right to own a car, or to have a car, or to have your father give you a car.
I heard most of yours.
That never operates on a public road is, public, private transfer, So as a conservative, you'd say your right, it comes back down to these old metaphors, like your right to swing your arms ends as soon as you're punching somebody else in the face. Jake?
Well, so we're talking about like when the federal government should intervene when people's rights are being violated. I'm just kind of thinking back to the civil rights movement. 1964, Barry Goldwater was against the Civil Rights Act. And he said, and then when he explained it, he said, I don't feel like people should, be able to discriminate against African Americans. But he said, I feel like if we pass this law in its current form, at some point in the future, it will be taken too far, to the point where we have like a racial caste system where now minorities are given preference over white people.
Yeah, in a way, it was also reflective of a kind of pessimism about culture too, because it was him saying, in order for this to work, we would need to militarize the entire federal government. So I understand, and another common theme of this show has been that all poison's in the dose. We believe in pluralism. Any single right taken to its extreme is a violation of all other rights. So there's no such thing as something that preserves a right that is in and of itself always a positive good. Every single good thing taken to its extreme becomes a bad thing. And because we believe in pluralism, we believe in the peaceful balancing of your many rights. So
I know we're almost out of time, but Commissioner Jerky, do you agree with that statement the professor just said?
Absolutely. When you go to the extremes, that's where you run into problems.
I am thankful.
No doubt.
Because I'm pretty sure you're pretty to the far right, at least of me. And I am so, and by the way, I love you as a human being. I know you as a man, and I know you're a good, decent, honorable person. And so I mean that as a human being, I think you're wonderful. Politically, I know you're to the far, far right. So yes, you are. And so I'm just thrilled that you just said, yes, of course, extremes are bad. And the professor's statement, that means something to me, because I think we're in some dangerous territory with people just hating on each other and willing to take violence maybe off that hate. I think we're in a dangerous situation in America, and I think we should fix that. And you're a part of that. Thank you. Professor, I know we're almost out of time. Bill, do you understand my statement in saying that? Do you agree that you're further to the right than I am?
I really don't know that I am. Maybe a little, but not much.
That may be true. Yeah, that may be true. Jake, last call for you, Bart, and Adonis, jump in before the professor gets the last word. We have like 2 minutes.
I just want to say, when you travel to other countries, you get a better view of our structure politically and otherwise. So,
and sometime you should tell us about your recent trip to Spain. Excellent.
Absolutely. I love Moroccans, especially Greek Moroccans. So.
Thank you, Adonis. All right, Bart, any last words? Jake? Bart, you good?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry, I couldn't unmute.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Professor, I think we're going to be cut off any second. Thank you for kind of wrapping it up with the common theme. Any last words for today?
No, just that when we talk about people who are more conservative, that's why we need to get the Lewis brothers on here to talk about the rejecting the political spectrum, because the thing about Commissioner Jerky is that you don't go to bed at night loving America and wake up the next day a Nazi. There's no such thing as like, you can love America as much as you want and never be an extremist. That's the nice thing about political pluralism, is because you say no matter how much you believe in individual liberty, you'll never stop rejecting individual liberty. No matter how much you believe in the protection of the rights of others, you'll never stop doing it. So at any rate,
Lovely.
We're out of time, but
yeah, we're almost out of time. Hey, Jake, do me a favor. Spend a couple minutes with me in private, talking about upcoming shows and some guests that the professor would like to come in. I promised the professor I'm not going to abuse his time. That's why I'd like to use your time, Jake, in scheduling some other conversations. Is that a deal? Jake?
Yes, you said yes.
All right, good. Hey, Professor, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, good. Professor, I think this conversation is more important than we think. All my liberal friends don't understand conservatives. None of them. They should. And hopefully this conversation will help them. Have a great